Welcome back, everyone. I'm here to do weekly articles for you all. Okay, this is the real queen of this delivery. Okay, so let's begin. We'll be talking about the brief history of the masses. Hopefully, y'all done heard about the masses. Okay, which is the people. Okay, we used to be the masses. Now they used to be the masses. Now we the masses. Okay, cause we the people. Okay. So let's read the article. A revolutionary and not a reform magazine, a free magazine, frank and arrogant, impertinent, searching for the true causes, a magazine directly against rigidity and dogma, whatever it is found. Printing what is too naked or true for a money-making press, a magazine whose final policy is to do as it pleases and consolate nobody, not even its readers. There is room for this publication in America. John Reed, 1913. This was the masses, his hilarious, creative, conservatory, free thinking, and free loving. In just a 7 year span from 1911 to 1917, the magazine makes a legendary mark. Its contributors wrote about strikes, birth control, wealthy politicians, lazy businessmen, dangerous working conditions, socialism, and prostitution. Some called it their written savor. Others dismissed it either as smut or the plain thing for young dilettantes. The masses paid harshly for its irreverent, radical message. The U.S. entry into World War I forced the magazine to adapt its irreverence into a concerted protest against U.S. militarism, and the refusal of the editors to back away from their anti-war position soon led to government censorship and prosecution, culminating in one of the most stunning courtroom dramas of the 20th century. As the United States today engage in war, the experiences of the masses seem both timely and disconcerting. To be certain, we are not living in a time where writing, I am for the people, and the government is for the profiteers, results in a 10-year prison sentence, as it did for radical Rose Pastor Schultz during World War I. While the story of the masses reminds us that freedom of the press is never so croissant, it also suggests that the right is not the only threat to the left's freedom of expression. The masses, founded in 1911 by Dutch immigrant Piet Vang, were initially just like the other radical publication, indignant, provocative, but ultimately mostly dry and rhetorical. However, when Max Eastman was appointed editor in 1912, he immediately set about changing the magazine. In the first issue under his editorship, he wrote, "Our peers will be the masses, both socialists and non-socialists, with entertainment, education, and the livelier kinds of propaganda." The masses soon attracted some of the best journalists and artists of its time. Writers like John Reed, who would later write 10 Days That Shook the World, Mary Heaton Booth, the premier labor journalist of her time, and Flora Dale, a fiction writer who became literary editor in 1913, injected the masses with an overwhelming enthusiasm for social change. Artists such as Art Young, a burly and hilarious man who combined Thomas Nast's influenced drawings with social content, and John Sullivan, a pioneer of what came to be known in the Ashcan School of Art, brought humor, realism, and beauty in the magazine's pages. I'm hearing they are us and we are them, okay? From the movie Return of the Living Dead Part 3, okay? The magazine reported on everything from the labor movements and the military tendencies of the Boy Scouts. Its written poked fun of pot-belly politicians, wealthy capitalism, so, so, society ladies, and personal socialists alike. The magazine continually made fun of itself and the rest of the radical movement. In the process, it often angered activists such as Emma Goldman, who thought the magazine should adopt a more serious tone in fitting with the serious problems of the times. The Masses was and maybe still is one of the few journals on the left that could make fun of itself as well, explains labor historian Nick Salvatore. That's not to say they took their politics lightly, but I think they had an understanding of human absurdity. Similarly, Dan North, son of New Masses editor Joseph North, recalled one of his favorite Masses cartoons. It showed a fat plutocrat dragging a prostrate woman before a judge and saying, Your Honor, this woman gave birth to a naked child." That was vintage Masses stuff. Good satire beats self-righteous proclamations every time. The Masses' unique combination of human arts, and politics was threatened in 1915 by the growing possibility of the U.S. entry into World War I. Americans had elected Woodrow Wilson to the presidency in 1916 based largely on his promise to keep the U.S. out of the conflict. But after re-election, Wilson began openly advocating for war. The mission of the Masses suddenly became more complicated. The magazine that prided itself on its lacks of ideology or dogma decided that it had to take a stand against the war. The position alienated some contributors. In March 1917, Eastman circulated an anti-war petition among the artists and writers and asked them to sign it. Artist George Bellows refused. In his letter to the Eastman, he wrote, "The Masses has no business with a policy. It is not a political paper and will do better without any platforms. Its policy is the expression of the contributors. They have the right to change their minds continually, looking at things from all angles." Although most contributors signed the policy, the change was significant. The Masses began publishing more serious articles than ever before, and did so alongside strutting warrants of wealthy politicians gazing off into the distance as dead soldiers piled up on flat European fields. Yeah, like movies and cartoons and all that shit, okay, y'all. With the Socialist Party divided over whether to support U.S. intervention, the Masses became one of the few periodicals that constantly printed articles against the war. One issue carried James Hopper's description of a dead French soldier who, on the stretcher, laid a little dead Pierre in red pants. His head was covered with blue shredder, which recalled to me the day of coming winter when all the women of France had been knitting. He lay on his stomach, his knees brought up slightly beneath him, as if he had been struck while visually butting forward, and because of this position which shortened him, and because of the gay red pants, he looked like a child, okay? The Masses contributors knew too much about government censorship to expect that they would be able to continue to protest the war openly. True. In the April 1917 issue, Reed wrote, "War means an ugly mob, madness crucifying the fruit tellers, choking the artists, side-cracking reforms, revolutions, and the working of social forces." Then in June 1917, Congress passed the Espionage Act, making many forms of speech unlawful, including those that tried to obstruct the recruiting of soldiers. About 3 weeks later, the Masses received a letter from the postmaster of New York City informing that the August issue was unmailable. Eastman demanded to know why, and after some legal wrangling, Judge Lund Hand revealed that 4 cartoons and 3 editors were to blame. The cartoons included a drawing of the Liberty Bell breaking apart, a drawing titled "Making the World Safe for Capitalism," a Wheel of Destruction called "Conscription," and an art young drawing of arm dealers bossing around Congress saying, "Run along now. We got through with you when you declared war for us." The editors included two by Eastman, one defending Emma Goldman and Alexander Buckman's anti-draft activism, and another opposing their imprisonment in an unsigned article by Floydale, advocating for conscientious objection. Judge Hand, a strong defender of civil liberties, ruled on behalf of the masses. He said that the prices in question fall within the scope of their right to criticize, which is normally the privilege of the individuals and countries dependent upon the free expression of opinions and the ultimate source of authority. But the postmaster did not stop there. He filed an appeal and brought the case before the small conservative town of Windsor, Vermont. He sought out the most conservative judge he could find. The judge initially delayed his ruling, thus harming the masses, which depended, as all magazines do, on mailing its products to subscribers in a timely manner. What happened next seemed more like a cruel joke than the rulings of a judicial system. When Eastman presented the September issue for mailing, the postmaster informed him that he was revoking the masses' second-class mailing privileges on the grounds that since it had not mailed its August issue, it was no longer a regularly published periodical. The fiasco soon came to a close. A three-judge court overturned Judge Hand's verdict and declared the masses officially unmailable. The magazine could not survive without the loose of the mails. The November/December issue was its last. On the same day the masses closed up shop, its staff heard news of the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia. It was as though we had achieved the revolution and could now take a rest, Eastman recalled. The masses' troubles were far from over. However, although the magazine had stopped publishing in 1918, the government changed several masses contributors: Max Eastman, Floydale, Art Young, John Reed, H.J. Glenkamp, Murray Rogers, and Josephine Bell, with violating the Espionage Act. The case, United States versus Eastman, L.I. charged with 7 artists and writers with conspiracy to obstruct enlistment. A guilty verdict could mean 20 years in prison and or $10,000 fine. The chances of conviction was real. In Los Angeles, the director of the Revolutionary War film called The Spirit of 76 was sentenced to 10 years in prison because, as the judge said, the film tended to question the good faith of our ally, Great Britain. The case initially was officially called U.S. versus Spirit of 76. In South Dakota, a farmer named Fred Fairchild was sentenced to a year and a day in prison for saying, "If I were of conscription age and had no dependents and was drafted, I would refuse to serve. They could shoot me, but they could not make me fight." On and on it went. By war's end, over 900 people were sent to prison under the Espionage Act. The seven defendants approached trial with great fear and uncertainty. However, in typical Marxist fashion, they kept their sense of humor. They sent out postcards to their friends that read, "We expect you for the weekly sedition, object, overthrow of the government. Don't tell a soul." The trial, which opened on April 15, 1918 in New York City Hall, became quite a spectacular as it was going on. A Liberty Bond rally was being held on the streets. The sounds of the Star-Spangled Banner could be heard in the courtroom. Murray Rogers, the Masses business editor, immediately stood at attention with a Solomon and mock patriot stance. The judge, learned Hand's cousin, Augustus Hand, had no choice. He stood too, then the entire courtroom had to stand. 20 minutes later, the band played the song again. Again, Rogers stood up, and the whole fiasco repeated itself. This happened no less than 4 times, after which the judge declared, "I think we should have to dispense with the ceremony from now on." The defendants took different approaches to the trial. Some, like Eastman and Dale, spent their time on the stand lecturing about socialism, conscientious objections, and civil liberties. Others, like Art Young, prefer to spend their time mocking their surroundings. Young slept through most of the crowd. He later drew a picture of one of his naps, which he titled Art Young on Crowd for his life. Even Flordell later commented, one may not smoke or read or whisper much or laugh at all, and this, too, such as have not yet got loose to it, is one of the serious hardships of being on crowd. True. Josephine Bell, the masses poet, had her charges dropped after the judge could not understand how her rambling, free verse piece could even be considered a poem. The others, Reed and Glickamp, could not attend the trial as they was in Russia and Mexico, respectively. The jury will return several days later unable to reach a verdict. 11 was in favor of conviction with 1 for acquittal. The defendants was free. In the meantime, Eastman had started a new magazine. The Liberators, unlike the masses, the Liberators deliberately toned down its articles and drawings to pass the censor. The magazine supported Wilson's war effort in the League of Nations. John Reed reassigned from the air the board in disgust. Okay, I'm all done. Ooh. A year later, however, the government decided to retry the masses. This time, Reed was present and spoke eloquently about his beliefs. When asked his feelings on class war, he replied, "Well, to tell you the truth, it's the only war that interests me." Eastman also spoke intelligently and is in a great length. He ended 3 days of testimony with some concluding remarks on socialism. It's either the most beautiful and courageous mistake that hundreds of millions of mankind ever made, or it is really the truth that will lead us out of misery, anxiety, and poverty, and war and strife and hatred between classes into a free and happy world. In either case, it deserves your respect. That's how I feel too, okay? Amen. Eugene Debs later called Eastman's speech a masterpiece, which would stand as a classic in the literature of revolution. For his part, the prosecutor L.B. Barnes concluded his case with Solomon words about a friend of his who died in the war. Somewhere in France, he lies dead, and he died for you, and he died for me. He died for Max Eastman. He died for John Reed. He died for Flordell. He died for Merle Rogers. His voice is one of the thousand silent voices that demand that these men be punished. True. A few seconds before, Young had woken up. Upon hearing Barnes' words, Young leaned back on his chair and cried out, "Why didn't he die for me too?" The courtroom burst into laughter, and the intended effect of the prosecutor's speech was ruined. And once again, the jury was unable to reach a verdict with 4 in favor of conviction and 8 for acquittal. This was the last trial for the masses. In the years that followed, Reed would return to Russia, where he died of typhus in 1920. He was buried in the Kremlin Wall. Flordell settled down and spent his time writing fiction. Art Young continued to draw political cartoons and satires, and later became active in the Communist Party. Max Eastman was one of the first Americans to point out the dangers of Stalin in the 1930s and 40s. However, in the 50s, his politics took a turn to the right. He accepted a job editing the Reader's Digest and supported Joseph McCarthy's anti-communist hearings. In 1924, the Liberators merged with the Labor Herald and became the Workers' Monthly, an official paper of the Communist Party. In 1926, a magazine calling itself The New Masses appeared. Doddering, serious, and often rigid in thinking, it bore little resemblance to the old masses. Neither the masses nor the liberators would have recognized its final left-handed offsprings, wrote poet and old masses contributor Louis Untermeyer. As Dan North, now a labor activist, told me, the party membership of the leading editors, such as my father, placed the magazine firmly under party control. The U.S. Communist Party was never known for its sense of humor. It was not friendly to experimentation or competing ideas. True, my father and others shaft under the conditions, but they were so committed to the party's work against economic inequality, inequality, racism, and fascism that they obeyed the dead hand of conformity. The new masses, to its credit, did publish the work of writers including Landon Hughes and Richard Wright, so its reputation may actually be a bit richer than it normally seemed. Still, the original free-thinking spirit of the masses was gone. True, which is beautiful drawings, irreverent cartoons, controversial articles, and unconventional cast of characters. The masses left behind no equal. Okay? The masses provides an important lesson for the left. None of the leading political magazines today even approach the level of human satire and hard news reporting. Nothing quite like it. Howard Zinn noted in a recent interview, the progressive in the nation was not as radical, but I suppose that it a close we can come. But none of them have the cultural figures that the masses had. True, for historian Nick Salvatore, the onion sort of carries on the tradition today, but in a different way. Yeah, they do. And thus, as one reads over old issues of the masses, one cannot help but agree with John Reed, who declared in 1913, there is room for this publication in America. Okay, so this is the story behind the masses. Okay, it used to be us, now it's them, now it's gonna be us again. Okay, so enjoy.